There are now reports that MI5 is probing that these three guys, all of them male models from Eastern Europe, actually all born in Ukraine, but one of them seems to have become a Romanian. So you've got three young male models from Eastern Europe living in London who stand accused of launching these firebomb attacks on two properties and a car connected to the Prime Minister. In itself, extraordinary. Now MI5 probing a potential Russian link. Did Russia stage this? Did Putin somehow hire these three guys to bring these attacks about? That is the suggestion. That's what MI5 are looking into. But I can't remember, with all due caution that we have to exercise here legally, Isabel, I can't remember a Prime Minister of this country being caught up in a more bizarre story than this.
It really is an extraordinary story, and the reason that I think you and I want to talk about it is because whilst recognising that three young men have been charged, and we clearly can't go into the detail or speculate beyond the facts of the matter, this is what everybody in political circles is talking about. And if they're not, they should be. Something very, very strange has gone on here, and I wonder whether we'll ever know. And it's interesting, you showed the headline there in yesterday's Mail on Sunday about potential link to Russia. I mean, people might be wondering, well, why would Russia use the suspects here, those who are accused, and we don't know how they're going to plead, are Ukrainian. Why would Russia use Ukrainian people to carry out something like this? And the answer is perhaps in the way that Russian hybrid warfare works. This, you could argue, is a classic of this kind. An operation of this kind would be a classic Russian hybrid warfare operation, just to throw out some confusion. Let's unsettle leaders. Let's get everybody talking about whether this might be us. And let's make it look not too professional, just because we don't want it to look as if a state operator is behind it. That's the kind of way that Russian hybrid warfare works. And it's really interesting to note that there have been a similar spate of attacks in Germany. In that case, they were not targeted against the leader of Germany, the German Chancellor. They weren't targeted against individuals. They were targeted against parcel depots. But again, the Russian link is being probed there. So truly murky and fascinating. I would add one other thing. Very, very few people know where Keir Starmer's properties are and know what car registration he has. I don't know that. I'm a political journalist. I've been around a while. I wouldn't even know how to find that information. I might be able to quite readily find one address beyond 10 Downing Street, but to have several addresses implies a very special level of knowledge. And that means there's someone very serious behind this, potentially a state operator, hence the MI5 probe, or somebody who knows them very well.
Yeah, and at some point, I understand why the Prime Minister can't talk about this at the moment, because it's sub judice. These three guys, these three male models who were charged last week, are all in custody and will appear in court. So the Prime Minister can't really talk about it now, but at some point I do feel he owes us some kind of transparency, some kind of explanation. We can't have a Prime Minister getting caught up in this kind of stuff and then it just... no, there's never any explanation and we just move on. We're going to need to know about what the hell has been going on here. And while we're at it, there are so many questions about this guy. I want to know, why really did he and we're told his family move into Lord Wahid Ali, Labour's Dr. Feelgood donors, massive penthouse Covent Garden apartment during the election campaign. Why really did they do this? Because Keir Starmer says, well, what it was, he said, well, it's my son. He was studying for his GCSEs, and there was, you know, so many press outside the house. We were besieged. Well, there are two things about this. First of all, he wouldn't be besieged. There might be the odd camera crew out there, the odd photographer, but leaders of the opposition in these circumstances, they're not besieged. They're not besieged, so I'm not buying that. And when he says that, well, we had to get out of there so that my kid could study for his GCSEs, we subsequently learned that at the time they were living in Lord Wahid Ali's apartment, the GCSEs were over. So that excuse doesn't stack up. You know, there's so many aspects of this guy's life that seem to be mysterious, that he kind of covers up with half-truths. So there are things, this is our Prime Minister, and there seem to be things going on with him that I think at some point he owes us an explanation for. Don't you agree?
We're in an era where voters don't mind if their political leaders have unconventional domestic or private lives. I don't know about Keir Starmer's private life. He talks about his wife Victoria being his best friend, and that's all very nice. We don't see a lot of her, but that's her prerogative. Not all first ladies want to be part of the political front line. And most voters don't care. They don't care. But it becomes a problem if there's ever any situation where, for example, a leader can be blackmailed or where they're being hypocritical. Now, I don't think Starmer is being hypocritical because he doesn't pose with his family, he doesn't put them out there. But I do think that it just is all a little bit strange. There's something not quite right, is how it feels to me personally. And that's separate to this MI5 Russia probe. I suppose that if your arrangements are a little complicated, as they must be, if you're moving around, you know, you're moving your children into apartments with very wealthy characters who are not part of your immediate family, that does open you up to perhaps being targeted by hostile players, whether they're state level or whatever that may be. And all politicians have to be very aware of that. Anyone in the public eye has to be aware of that.
Yes, it's an extraordinary situation that our Prime Minister finds himself in, and he can't talk about it now, but at some point he's going to have to. It may be entirely not his fault. It could be that the Russians...
I think that's very possible.
...have fitted him up. Maybe the Russians have, and as you say, it would be straight out of their playbook, but who knows? And we need to know at some point, but it isn't going to be just yet. The justice has to take its course first. Let's get you now, if we can, Isabel, on this extraordinary story on the front page of the Telegraph today. Trump pressurises PM over Connolly. Apparently Donald Trump and the White House are putting great pressure on Starmer to say, look, you believe in freedom of speech, you better release Lucy Connolly, the mum who's doing 31 months for posting a hurty word tweet on X. Why don't you release him now? And also we learn that Trump sent a delegation of officials over here to investigate the way the British deal with anti-abortion campaigners. They believe that is very dangerous for freedom of speech here and freedom of expression here as well. So there's this ongoing kind of cultural clash between America's visceral belief in freedom of expression and freedom of speech and Keir Starmer's warped version of it, where he thinks he's able to say, I believe in freedom of speech, whilst locking people up for what they tweet. 12 people are in jail for what they tweeted over the summer riots. Any leader who locks people up for what they put on social media, in my view, is no champion of freedom of speech.
This is so embarrassing, isn't it? You know, traditionally, British prime ministers go to places like China, they go to the Middle East, and they're under massive pressure, usually from the left, to give during those high-level meetings, to deliver a lecture about human rights, and these are usually meetings with leaders of countries to which, many British leaders feel that we're superior in some way. Now, how the tables have turned. We now have other countries, the most powerful country in the world, having to deliver our leaders a little rebuke about human rights effectively. That's what we're talking about here. Freedom of speech, fundamental right, actually, under Article 8 of the ECHR, which unfortunately we're still in. So we have to abide by that. And we are on the receiving end, and rightly so. And I just find it extraordinary that the Trump administration feels the need to monitor UK political prisoners. That is the depths to which we have sunk under this government.
Let's remind ourselves of when Starmer was in the White House, J.D. Vance having a go at him on this very issue.
Look, I said what I said, which is that we do have, of course, a special relationship with our friends in the UK and also with some of our European allies, but we also know that there have been infringements on free speech that actually affect not just the British. Of course, what the British do in their own country is up to them, but also affect American technology companies and, by extension, American citizens.
We've had free speech for a very, very long time in the United Kingdom, and it will last for a very, very long time. Well, no, I mean, certainly we wouldn't want to reach across US citizens, and we don't, and that's absolutely right. But in relation to free speech in the UK, I'm very proud of our history there.
Yeah, with tap dancing skills like that, he should go on Strictly Come Dancing, shouldn't he? You can't. We don't have freedom of speech if we're going to lock people up for what they tweet. I mean that. We cannot be locking people up for hurty words on social media. Keir Starmer just thinks it's totally just. As long as you're inciting violence, then yes. 12 people are in jail for what they tweeted, what they put on posts, Facebook or Instagram during those riots, and they just shouldn't be.
Keir Starmer, it's just a reminder, that little clip that you played, of the fact that we have a Prime Minister who seems to think that just by saying something is the case, that literally makes it true. Just as he says he's going to smash the gangs, and he is smashing the gangs, and Labour's reducing immigration, none of this is actually true. But he feels that if he just keeps saying it, somehow or other people will think it's true. I don't think anyone in the UK now thinks that they have unfettered freedom of speech. And it's certainly true that in a civilised society, there probably is some place for some minimal limits on freedom of speech. There are certain thresholds that perhaps a civilized society says you shouldn't be able to cross, but not in the case of Lucy Connolly, where some random young mother, childminder who no one's ever heard of, briefly loses her temper and tweets something silly and deletes it 4 hours later and is in prison for 31 months. Are you kidding me?
Yeah,
it's North Korea.
It's a continued stain on British justice. It really is. We've got to let her out. There's a story talking about, the increasing kind of sinister atmosphere in this country. There's a story on page 9 of the Daily Telegraph today saying half of white men now self-censor themselves at the office because they're terrified that they may say something that's not politically correct, that's not doesn't fit with the new DEI culture, etc., etc. So we're losing freedom of speech because we're getting scared about what trouble we may get into if we say the wrong things. That is not good. Before you go, I've got to get you on the Daily Mail front page today, Isabel. Just showing it there if you're not looking. It's scandal of fat cats on first ever NHS rich list. Basically, there are now 1,700 bureaucrats, middle managers on the NHS earning more than 100,000 a year. 512 are earning more than the Prime Minister. That means they're earning more than £173,000 a year. And 300 of them are on more than £200,000 a year. And I know for a fact there are quite a few on more than 300, more than 400 and more than £500,000. Now, I don't want to hear all these lefties, all these NHS apologists going, oh, we would give us more money. We need more money to heal the sick. Well, get rid of some of these 300 grand a year fat cats. Get rid of them. They're doing jobs that no one can explain. The middle management of the NHS is a scandal. It's a scandal. By the way, they also spend £40 million a year on 800 diversity officers. Get rid of them as well. The NHS's problem is not enough money. It's that they get enough money, but they have no idea how to spend it properly.
Well, I think there's a further piece of analysis that someone could do here, looking at whether the people that are being paid that much money are attached to trusts that are actually in good financial shape or in heavy deficit. And I guarantee that the majority of those individuals will be working for NHS trusts that are in financial trouble. How do I know that? Because pretty much all NHS trusts are in financial trouble. So there is no excuse for this. There are plenty of brilliant people who, out of their passion for trying to create a health service that would reliably deliver world-class healthcare to the vast majority of people that use it, there are people who would do that job for next to nothing.
Absolutely. People say, oh, well, you know, if you sorted out these highly paid middle managers, that's still just a drop in the ocean. It's a start, and it's not a drop in the ocean. They're getting paid hundreds of millions of pounds a year. So we have to stop that. We really do. Isabel, fantastic to talk to you as always. Thank you so much. We'll talk later in the week. That's Isabel Oakeshott, Talks International Editor.